I didn't come back because I missed the place. I came back because something in me had stopped moving. The town looked smaller than I remembered. Not different. Just less impressed by my return. The same main street. The same diner on the corner. The same gas station with prices that felt frozen in time. I'd been gone 12 years. Long enough to build a life elsewhere. Short enough for this place to remember exactly who I used to be. I parked the car in front of my childhood home. The house my parents still lived in. Same porch, same steps that creaked if you stepped too close to the edge. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary. Not because I was nervous, because I wasn't sure which version of myself I was about to introduce. My mother hugged me tightly, too tightly, like she was trying to confirm I was real. My father nodded, same nod he'd always used. Pride mixed with restraint. "You staying long?" he asked. "A couple weeks," I said. That felt like the safest answer. My old room was exactly how I'd left it. Same bookshelf, same desk, different silence. I unpacked slowly, not because I was tired, because I didn't want to finish arriving. I hadn't planned on seeing anyone from my past. No announcements, no messages. I told myself this trip was about rest, about space, about nothing important. That lie lasted 3 days. I ran into her at the grocery store, of all places. Same aisle, same brand of cereal we used to argue about. Her name was Hannah. And the moment I saw her, time folded in on itself. She looked older. So did I. But not in a dramatic way. In a way that suggested life had been lived, not paused. "Oh," she said, surprised but not shocked. "Hey." "Hey," I replied. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. We stood there awkwardly, carts between us, like strangers pretending history wasn't watching. "I heard you moved back," she said. "Just visiting," I corrected. She nodded. Of course. I'd always been just visiting when it came to this place. We talked about safe things, work, her kids, my job in the city, topics with edges sanded down. "You look good," she said finally, not flirtatious, observational. "So do you," I answered, and meant something more complicated. We didn't exchange numbers, didn't make plans, but the encounter stayed with me longer than it should have. That night, I walked past the high school. The field lights were on, some local game. I stopped, watched for a while, feeling like an observer in a life I'd opted out of early. Hannah and I had dated when we were young, serious in the way only young people can be. Full of plans, none of them flexible. I'd left for college. She'd stayed. We promised to make it work. We didn't. At the time, I told myself leaving was necessary. That ambition required distance. That staying would have trapped me. Now, standing there years later, I wasn't sure if I'd escaped or just postponed something unfinished. 2 days later, my mother mentioned Hannah casually. "She's doing well," she said. "Married, divorced now, 2 kids." She watched me carefully. I pretended not to notice. I told myself it didn't matter. That was another lie. I ran into Hannah again at the coffee shop downtown. This time, she smiled first. "Looks like this town isn't done with you," she said. "Or it's trying to remind me of something," I replied. She raised an eyebrow. "Careful," she said. "Reminders can be dangerous." We sat together. No pretense this time, just familiarity resurfacing. "You left fast," she said at one point. Not accusing, just factual. "I didn't know how to stay," I answered. That felt like the truest thing I'd said all week. She stirred her coffee slowly. "I used to think you'd come back," she admitted, "for years." I didn't ask what made her stop thinking that. The answer was obvious. "You seem different," she said. "How so?" "Quieter, like someone who's learned what not to say." I smiled. That sounds about right. We talked longer than planned, about mistakes, about timing, about how life rarely asks for permission before moving on. As we stood to leave, she hesitated, then said, "If you want to catch up properly, let me know." No expectation, no pressure. Just an opening. That night I lay awake in my old bed, staring at a ceiling I'd stared at 1,000 times before, feeling something I hadn't expected, not longing, not regret, possibility. But possibility has weight, and I'd spent years choosing lives that felt lighter. The next morning, I got a message from my office, a reminder, deadlines, meetings, the life I'd built calling me back. And for the first time, I didn't immediately feel relief. I felt interruption. I realized something unsettling. I'd come back to rest. But what I found was movement. And Hannah, with her history, her clarity, her rootedness, represented something I'd never allowed myself to consider fully. A life that didn't require leaving to feel meaningful. I didn't know yet whether I was capable of choosing that. But I knew this. If I walked away again without asking the harder questions, I'd recognize the pattern immediately. Later that day, I texted her. Simple. Open quote. Coffee tomorrow? Close quote. She replied minutes later. Open quote. Tomorrow works. Close quote. I stared at the message and felt that familiar tightening in my chest. Not fear. Responsibility. Because this time, coming back wasn't accidental. And leaving same coffee shop. Different tension, not awkward, intentional. She was already there when I arrived, sitting near the window, watching the street like someone who knew exactly what passed by and what never came back. Hey, she said. Hey. We didn't hug. Didn't need to. For a while, we talked about small things again. Work schedules, weather, how crowded the town got on weekends now. But underneath it all, something heavier waited patiently. I won't pretend this is casual, she said finally. I appreciated that. I wouldn't believe you if you did, I replied. She smiled. A tired one. An honest one. We walked after that. No destination, just movement. Like before. Only this time, neither of us was pretending we didn't know where this could lead. I'm not the same person you left, she said. I wouldn't want you to be, I answered. She stopped walking, looked at me carefully. And you, she asked, are you the same man who ran? I didn't answer immediately, because the truth wasn't flattering. I learned how to succeed, I said. I learned how to leave. I learned how to start over. I took a breath. I never learned how to stay. She nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something she'd already suspected. We sat on a bench near the park. Kids ran past us. Parents yelled names. Life happening loudly. I built something here, she said. Not perfect, but real. I know, I replied, and I did. I can't uproot my life, she continued, and I won't ask you to abandon yours. She turned to me. But if we're talking honestly. That night, I opened my laptop, scrolled through emails, deadlines, projects planned months ahead. The future, efficient and distant. For years, I'd told myself this life was the reward, that everything I gave up had been exchanged for something better. But sitting there, back in my childhood room, that logic felt incomplete. I realized something unsettling. I wasn't afraid of failing here. I was afraid of succeeding and still feeling empty. The next few days blurred together. Hannah and I saw each other often, not constantly, intentionally spaced, as if we were both testing reality. We talked about the past without romanticizing it, talked about what hurt, what we misunderstood, what we never said out loud. You always thought staying meant settling, she said once. I thought leaving meant growing, I replied. Turns out, she said, we were both half right. One evening, she invited me over. Her kids were with their father. The house was quiet, not empty, lived in. I noticed details, photos on the fridge, shoes by the door, a calendar filled with obligations that mattered. You fit here more than you think, she said, noticing my glance. I didn't argue. That scared me. We didn't rush anything, no dramatic moment, just closeness, careful, measured. Later, lying awake beside her, I stared at the ceiling again. Different ceiling this time. Same questions. What does it mean to return? To a place? To a person? To a version of yourself you abandoned for momentum? My phone buzzed early the next morning. A call from my manager. I didn't answer. For the first time, not out of avoidance, but because I needed silence. That afternoon, I drove around town alone, past familiar streets, past houses where people had stayed. Not stuck, stayed. I realized something important. I'd always framed my leaving as bravery. But staying and committing, required a different kind of courage. That evening, I sat with my parents, told them I was considering changes. They didn't look surprised. My mother smiled softly. My father nodded. That nod again. This time, approval without restraint. I think, my father said slowly, you finally know what you're choosing, not just what you're running from. I met Hannah later that night, told her everything. No strategy, no promise, just truth. I don't know yet what this looks like, I said, but I know I don't want to disappear again. She listened, didn't interrupt, didn't rescue me from the weight of my words. I won't wait blindly, she said gently, but I will meet you where you stand. That was enough. More than enough. 2 weeks later, I extended my stay. Then again, then longer. I negotiated remote work, then partial, then something new entirely. Not impulsively, deliberately. Months passed, not dramatically, steadily. I didn't lose ambition. I redirected it towards something that didn't require distance to feel valuable. One evening, walking through town with Hannah beside me, I understood the difference. Leaving had made me interesting. Staying made me present. I'd spent years believing growth required departure. I was wrong. Sometimes growth requires depth. I came back thinking the town had changed. It hadn't. I had. And this time, when I stayed, it wasn't because I was afraid to leave. It was because I finally knew where I belonged.